there were times, and that's the other thing is like, you want to go back to those times, because when he wasn't like that, then it would be great. Like he'd be super fun, boyish, and um, but I was never comfortable. I was never relaxed. I was always on edge. And you asked about the honeymoon thing. We didn't have that in our relationship. What would happen would be, he would, as I said, I'd wake up in the morning, having cried all night. He would just be right at it again on me, all day long, or, well, actually, if the cycle was that all of a sudden everything would be great, but then he would just start to get testy, and he would start to, just, I couldn't do anything right, so he would just like pick up on stupid little things and go after me for them. And that would really make me worry, because I could see it building. And then there'd be that blow up. Then there'd be like the rampage. If I didn't stop it in time, again, like if I was not able to stop it, by doing whatever I had to do to just pull it back in, then the switch would flip. He'd become the monster. And then it would be like 3 or 4 days of absolute hell. And then we wake up in one of the mornings, and I would be a wreck because of what I've just gone through. And he'd look at me and say something like, "Oh, so you're gonna pout all day, or you're gonna have that attitude all day?" So that was the sign that, and right away I would be like having to like plaster a smile on or something, because I wanted it to end. And that was okay, so if I pretend like nothing happened, then things can start to go back to normal. So that's what would happen. He would say that, I would just say, force a smile on my face, and then it would be a little time during the day, and then gradually going back to, boyish, fun Dawn, until it was almost like a moon cycle. It seemed to me like it was every month that would happen. It would start all over again.
Yeah, and so is that an accurate depiction of walking on eggshells? Is that what the family starts to do?
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, yeah, the weird thing is that do you bring children? I talked to a woman very recently. She told me she always wanted 2 children. She had 1 child, and because of the way he treated that child and her, and what was going on in the house, she consciously did not have another child. She didn't want to have another child in that home, but she was in it for 49 years, and her first child was in it for the whole still.
Yeah.
So then she made a decision. She knew enough about what was going on and how bad it was that imagine that, denying herself another child. So that's the thing. Like, it's almost like if someone's in war, like if you're living in Iraq, during the war, do you have a child? Do you bring a child into that? I guess that's the decision, do you bring a child into it? But then I think I felt, I don't know, I felt like, I don't know, I just felt like the child would help us, because I thought that, if we have a baby, he'd love the baby, and we'd be happy. And then,
I think that's very common, by the way. I mean, I think a lot of people feel very engaged in the fact that a loving baby, an innocent child, is going to kind of help this situation. It's just another kind of innocent life that is going to thrive and be loved. And I think, at least if I were to guess, how and I never asked my mother this, but I think the perception is that I'm going to drop this child into the calm waters, into that period between the erupting violence and the next episode, is this kind of eye of the hurricane, this quiet calm, and that's where the kid's going to live. The kid's going to live in this kind of boyish Don. We're a family, and for periods of time, that's exactly where the kid lives, but it doesn't stay there.
Well, my daughter she says that she never witnessed any physical abuse, but she said that she felt like it was a matter of life or death in the house. She felt that there was, and so she picked up on that. Like, she picked up on that, how heavy that was in the house, that, what was going on. And oh my God, like, I guess I felt like she wasn't, like, it happened at night a lot of times. So I thought that she didn't hear it,
but there's an energy in the house. I mean,
well, that's what it was.
In a domestic violence ridden house, there is a heavy, at least I could tell you from my standpoint, there is a heavy energy, a dark cloud, a threatening cloud that looms, and you never, I just remember this when my father would go away on a conference or a trip, that the end, we'd have a little sugared cereal, mom would buy these special groceries. It would be like we'd watch movies, and it was like that energy dissipated the further he got away from, 14 Thomas Drive or 32 Clearview Lane. I mean,
But
as soon as
you still never talked about it though.
no, you never talked about it, but they do bring the energy, the energy, the vibration of the house in the presence of the abuser is definitely dark, and it's heavy, and it's threatening. That's how I describe it.
It is, but it's so interesting that like my daughter, that's another thing my daughter said, is that the only time we're only now really after I left him, we could start talking about him, like the elephant in the room that's causing all this chaos and distress. But isn't it interesting that even when, he was away, it's not like the kids and I had this conversation, like it's a lot nicer without your father or anything like that. Like we just never talked about that at all.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, that is, I mean, if you were to talk to any therapist about dysfunctional families, I mean, there's three primary rules: don't talk, don't feel, don't tell. I mean, and that doesn't change when the abuser's not there. I mean, you learn to really just stay closed off. You might feel a little free, the threat might be gone. It's still the waters are still there, and the storm can perk up as soon as they come home. But yeah, you definitely don't talk about it. But that energy, like a blanket, does sit over everybody in the family. But there is no talking about it. Absolutely not.
Like I remember going to out to a restaurant with him. So me and the kids would be sitting at a restaurant, and the whole meal, like we were so on edge, like terrified that one of the kids is going to knock over a glass of water. And he was always jumping on it, like anytime anything looked like it was going to happen. And I don't know, like looking back, like I just don't, I never thought to just say like it was so crazy and it's so unfair to the kids and it's so horrible. Like who freaking cares? I mean, you knock a glass over, fine, but that was never voiced. And it was just like, but then I'm complicit because I'm sitting there as a mother and I'm also like really worried that a glass is going to be knocked over. So that's normal to them, right?
Yes, very. And as this progressed, I mean, let's kind of move to how hard it was to finally leave. I mean, you had an event, you finally, and I don't, you'll share with us what it was for you that was, enough is enough. Because I think a lot of people, as you described, take longer because they do feel trapped. And I think this podcast and finding our voices and the things that you're doing to bring awareness to these feelings and what people can do is so powerful. But the end was, I know, very difficult and speaks volumes about the challenges of prosecuting domestic violence, about how the perpetrators of domestic violence, especially as it relates to celebrity status, can be handled. I mean, so you finally had to face all of that. There was an event that occurred where you said enough was enough, and tell us a little bit about kind of that line in the sand, how it got crossed, and where you found the courage to finally, take a stand.
Well, I didn't really say enough is enough. Basically, I called 911 at the second that I thought he was going to kill me. I thankfully had my phone in the bathroom with me with the door locked, and he was just shoving against it, and the door was splintering it, and he basically broke through the door, yelling out murderous threats. And so when I saw him, basically breaking through the door, I pressed 911. I had 911. I kept saying, I'm going to call 911. I'm going to call 911. Stop, and when he was basically breaking through the door, I pressed it, and 911 operator came on the phone. And I just remember that second where we're in the bathroom, basically the broken door. And this has been like 4 hours of terrorizing me and physically assaulting me, leading to this. And then I'm just like holding the phone, and the operator's like, "This is 911. Can I help you?" And I'm looking at him, and like 5 seconds earlier, he was like in a murderous homicidal rage, and now he's just like these puppy dog eyes, right, looking right at me, like, And so I was like, everything's fine, and they came anyway. And then I still said everything's fine and please don't arrest him. I don't know. They made an arrest. That's what happened. They made an arrest, and then there were headlines the next day about the arrest, and then my statement for the protection from abuse order was uncovered, and that was blasted all over the paper, with the details of what I'd gone through in the past 30 years. And so it was just all just put out in the public, really nothing to do with me really at all. And And then he just continued to be so mean, because he had bail conditions of no contact, and I just needed to get my things out of the house. It was a separation at this point, right? So we weren't talking. He got the house. I was roaming around trying to rent places. I mean, I feel like we might have gotten back together because I felt I loved him, and I couldn't imagine living without him. But the court thing had to play out. But then I just needed to get back to the house to get my things. Like I had an exhibit coming up. I needed my photos. I needed clothes. And on one hand, he was sending these messages of love through my own lawyer said, "Oh, Don's lawyer has a message for you that he's pining for you." My own lawyer told me that, third party contact. So on one hand, he was doing that crap. And on the other hand, he like wouldn't let me get in my house. He was like denying it. Like I had it, so it was just so mean, if he had kept up just the love bombing thing, I think I probably might have ended it back with him, but it was just too ridiculous. Like, so that started to open my eyes. Like, and then I started to read, like, Why Does He Do That by Lundy Bancroft. I started to talk to domestic abuse agency advocates and start to understand like what this is, what happened here. And just it was a period of my eyes opening and understanding, realizing what it was, that it was domestic abuse. And then my lawyer is like, do you want to file for divorce? I say, are you kidding me? Like, why do you think I hired you? Like, of course. So that's what it was. It was the time. That's it's so important for me to have had that time without him in my head. And that was because of the bail conditions. Thank God. That's, I think, what saved me.
Wow, well, that's amazing because I'm imagining the door cracking, the life feeling threatened, and still trying to protect the abuser. Don't arrest him. Even though your life was, very much at risk, and you'd already taken the steps to call 911. But that just speaks to me about how powerful domestic violence is and how deep the control lives, that even despite of your life being threatened, that fear being elevated, that in a moment's notice you're still apt to protect the abuser at any cost because you've been conditioned to do so. And that separation, that moment of clarity, I guess I'll call it, for lack of a better term, where you had some separation, some clarity of thought, some time to reflect on what was happening, and still seeing those signs of what he really was. So you kept seeing the angry nature, the controlling nature, the restrictive nature, and ultimately got yourself out. And I think that's so powerful because I think we can help people, pull that ripcord sooner, because, as you've done the research for them, that you can now tell them that, this isn't going to change. It's not going to get better. And the sooner you can get out, the better.
Do you believe that strongly, that it's not going to get better?
I do.
I do too. And do you think these guys can change?
I think there's a class of people that can change. I think there's a class of people that choose not to change. And I think, the amount of work that it takes for people to really change and become humble. I mean, I know from my own experience of having to go through, changes in my own nature as a result of the things I chose to do to cope with the pain. I don't see many of them willing to really humble themselves and become insightful enough to really do the work. So I think if they did, I think that there's a therapeutic, and a mental a mindset, way for people to heal their trauma and become insightful and make amends and right themselves. I just don't see many narcissists at that level really thinking that they need to do that. So they don't do the work.
What they do a lot of times, and mine did this, and a lot of people tell me that, like, I'll go to therapy. They always say, like, when they're trying to get the woman back, I'll go to therapy. It's not just going to therapy once or twice. As you said, it's a ton of work. They need 10 years of work before they're ready to have another relationship. So that just tells you right there.
That's what I'm talking. I went to therapy and I lied to my therapist. I'm not talking about the appearance of wanting to get better. I'm talking about the real hard, groundbreaking, soul crushing work that it takes to acknowledge the pain I've caused in other people's lives and look at the things I need to do differently, brick by brick, to rebuild those relationships. Stephen Covey says, my words cannot fix actions my behaviors caused. And I think that's what I always saw, is they just want their words to make things go away, but the behaviors never change. So to answer your question, I just haven't seen, in my experience, at least with my own father, and it sounds like with your ex-husband, that there's the narcissism, the control, whatever the disorder, the sociopathic disorders, it prevents them from actually doing the actual soul crushing work, the heart crushing work of really changing.